All right, well, welcome. My name is Andrea Medina Smith, and I am a research data librarian from the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US. I'm really glad that everyone has been able to join us today at this concluding conference for the Year of Open Science, where in our session, we'll be talking about the Research Data Framework and its place in open science integration. First off, we will be having my boss, Bob Hanisch, give us a quick overview of the RDaF. Then we will talk about how it intersects with open science and the ethos of open science. We'll look at how you can interact with the online RDaF, talk about some implementation examples, and then we will have time for questions at the end. So, Bob, can you take it away?
Yes, thank you, Andrea, and hello. I see a number of familiar names and faces participating today, so glad to see you all here. I'm talking to you today from Berlin, Germany, where I've just attended a full week of conferences about FAIR and FAIR digital objects, which will ultimately play a part in open science in a big way. We are optimistic. But for now, let me talk about the Research Data Framework. And if you'll go to the next slide, Andrea. First of all, a further word about myself. I'm the director of the Office of Data and Informatics at NIST. And I've been the lead of this project, the Research Data Framework, for the past 4 years and a bit. I'm not seeing the next slide, Andrea.
Did it blip out?
Okay, now we got it.
Okay.
Okay, very good. So first of all, what are we talking about with the Research Data Framework? This is really intended to be a map of the research data space, the who, what, where, why, when, who's involved, what do they do, where do they do it, why do they do it, when do they do it, so that people who are trying to orient themselves in this research data ecosystem know where to get started. It's intended to be a dynamic guide for the stakeholders in research data to help them understand best practices for research data management and research data dissemination. It's also a resource for understanding costs and benefits around research data management and also the risks associated. And the risks primarily are those associated with not doing research data management and the potential loss of information and the loss of data that cannot be easily replicated. And most important, it's a consensus document that's based on the inputs and conversations we've had with stakeholders in research data over the past 4 years. This is not NIST telling people what to do. Quite the contrary, this is people telling us what they do, and NIST acting as an integrator of this information, a collator, and organizing in a way that we hope it will be useful to others working in the research data space. Next slide. So why did we get into this in the first place? Well, it's sort of the business of NIST. You are probably familiar with the cybersecurity framework developed by NIST starting about 7 years ago. A new version just came out recently. And we sort of see it as kind of our obligation to go to help the community solve problems and orient themselves in situations that are complicated. And of course, the research data ecosystem is complicated. There are lots of players, lots of organizations, various funding models for data management and data sustainability. Questions are being asked about how long to retain research data, how to assess the quality of research data, and ultimately, how do we measure the value of research data? So we tried to address these questions in the Research Data Framework. Next slide. The benefits of the framework include increasing research integrity through providing quality data and improved transparency of the research process, reducing costs and maximizing efficiency through establishing best practices for data management, helping organizations assess risk, as I was mentioning, and reduce risk through assessment of those positions and identifying roadmaps for improvement. And again, kind of the bottom line is increasing scientific discovery and innovation through adherence to the FAIR principles and for improving utilization of data, seeing that data can be reused for purposes beyond those under which it was originally gathered and combined in ways that would not be possible without good discovery, good accessibility, and of course the interoperability and reusability characteristics inherent in the FAIR principles. Go ahead. So we recently released version 2 of the Research Data Framework publication. I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about the organization of the RDaF into the data lifecycle stages. But each of these lifecycle stages is divided into topics and subtopics, each of which has informative references and definitions. We reached this point using a methodology based on stakeholder input from a total of 18 workshops that we held over the period of about 3 years. We also did a formal request for information and garnered a number of further inputs through that process. One thing that came to light in our analysis of all of this input information was that there were a number of what we call overarching themes or concepts that span multiple life cycle stages. Sometimes these are explicit in numerous elements in the Research Data Framework Foundation. Sometimes they're implicit, but they're another way to sort of orient oneself in the research data ecosystem by following themes such as a major one is cost. Others are privacy and equity and so forth. So these themes permeate across the entire research data ecosystem. We also generated a number of what we call generic profiles. A profile identifies those elements in the framework that correspond to common research data management and researcher roles and responsibilities. These are not the same across all organizations, of course, but we provide these initial generic profiles as a starting point to assist individuals in different organizations to develop a custom profile that describes the roles and responsibilities that they have in their particular situation. And finally, we have itemized, having a quite extensive list of key organizations that documents the major organizations and players in the research data management space and describes in brief, at least, the roles that they play. So the 6 major lifecycle stages that we have organized things into are these, starting with envision, in which an organization basically lays out what are their data governance policies, how does data management fit into the overall structure of the organization, how is it valued throughout the organization from top-level management down to individual researchers. So this is really the big picture. How do you see yourself fitting into data management and in a very large scale? Planning is, planning is now getting into the details, writing data management plans, figuring out how one is going to acquire data, how one is going to store that data, what are the aspects of that data that might be need to be held private, what can be shared, and so forth. That all goes into the planning stage. Then there's the actual generation and acquiring of data. This might be through computer models and simulations. It might be through sophisticated instrumentation, observing, material properties, observing the universe with telescopes. It might be through polling the community, might be through various demographic means and so forth, might be through social media analysis. Process and analyze is what do you do with that raw data in order to extract information. Do you use open source software? Do you use proprietary software? Do you write your own codes? And what are the statistical methods that are used? Share, use, and reuse is about, how do you store this data? How do you make sure that it is tagged with sufficient metadata,
Next.
that it is useful for others to understand, and it is reusable? And then finally, preserve and discard is, what is your long-term preservation method? Do you need to make decisions about when to discard data? And if you have to discard data because it is no longer being utilized or because the cost has become prohibitive, how do you mark that it once existed through sort of an electronic gravestone? So these are the 6 major life cycle stages. And as I mentioned, each one of these is divided up into topics and subtopics. In total, there are 300-400 of these subdivisions that help one understand the various components in each of these life cycle stages. Next slide. So the stakeholders that we engaged with in developing the framework are listed here. I don't need to read through every one of these things, but I just want to point out that we span what we think are all of the constituencies in the research data ecosystem, from government agencies and national laboratories through scholarly publishers and professional societies, nonprofit organizations, standards bodies, funders, both public and private, and industry as well, even though their data may not be public. The principles that are enumerated in the Research Data Framework are equally important, even if you're operating inside of a certain firewall. And of course, researchers who are generating the data and the general public who are, of course, funding much of this data through their taxes and the investments that federal agencies make in funding research data. So, for example, the topics and subtopics, here's something from the Envision area where chain of custody is a topic, and we describe what we mean by chain of custody. Subtopics then are roles and responsibilities, implementation authorities, provenance, and there's a definition for each one of these subtopics and links to external references. We have compiled over 1,000 references and doing the framework. I think is probably the most exhaustive list of references ever compiled in this context. And it's been an amazing, just encyclopedic kind of work that we've done over the past 4 years. This whole process, as I mentioned earlier, has been produced and vetted by the stakeholder groups. We've gone through 2 previous iterations of the framework, and we now, as I say, have backed up every topic and subtopic with associated references. Next slide. Here's just to give you an idea of some of the overarching themes and how they map to the various life cycle stages. So things like cost and sustainability are, permeate diversity, equity, and inclusion, ethics, the FAIR principles. Metadata is pervasive, as should be no surprise to participants in this sort of a meeting. Standards, software, security, and privacy. So by identifying these overarching themes, it gives users of the framework an entry point. If you're really interested in sustainability, you can start at that part and then trace through the other parts of the framework in which cost and sustainability arise. So it's a navigation method to help you understand the various components in the framework. The profiles, as I mentioned, are there to help people understand their particular roles and responsibilities in research data management. They can serve as a checklist of those topics and subtopics in the research data lifecycle that are relevant to your particular position and your particular responsibilities in research data management. We have generated a number of sample profiles that are starting points but those can be customized, especially through using our online interactive version of the framework to basically pick and choose those elements of the framework that I like to say either you influence or you're influenced by. You don't necessarily control them, but these give you perhaps a springboard to talk with others in your organization saying, here's an area of common interest. I think this is something that's important to me or should be important to you. And let's have a conversation. Let's start a conversation about how our organization can address these issues. So next slide is why is RDaF important to open science? And at this point, I will turn it over to Andrea. And I just also want to mention that our other team member, Eva Campo, is also here, and all of us will be available to answer questions and your comments later on. So Andrea, over to you.
Thank you, Bob. So why would a framework like RDaF be important to open science? Well, it touches on open science throughout the life cycle. It captures captures the goal that this conference is aiming for, to promote the systems thinking that's needed and connect activities across major components of the research system. So it touches on infrastructure, community building, rewards and incentives, and good policymaking and implementation. Through the lens of RDaF, one can see how an organization handles each of those phrases in the research data lifecycle. We embrace the as open as possible, as closed as necessary ethos. We can understand that there's ethical limitations on open science, that there are ethical limitations of open science, and you can see that through the ethics overarching theme. We know that not all data should be open. Sensitive cultural, personal, and business data is subject to, among other things, indigenous sovereignty rights and the right to privacy. RDaF can help an organization walk through those considerations and while they're implementing an open data policy. And this is the one that, as a librarian, I like to focus on. RDaF promotes community building, outreach, and engagement as vital parts of the research data world. It's not all about gathering your data, analyzing it, and putting it out there in the world. It's about building a community that can use your data to have an impact on society. So RDaF reflects the values of open science. So here I've got the very long sentence, which is the US government definition of open science. And each of these values within this definition, equity, reproducibility, collaboration, diversity, security, privacy, and accessibility, are all part and reflected in the RDaF. They're both in the overarching themes and then within specific topics and subtopics. Finally, I got to know the UNESCO recommendation on open science a little bit better after being reminded of it during the plenary yesterday. And really, RDaF is a way to promote this recommendation, and especially their areas of actions and identified challenges such as capacity building. Those are the things that RDaF focuses on, and how you can implement and work with culture change or capacity building throughout the life cycle of a research project or through the entirety of a research organization. So I'd like to know if other people have questions about that. You can pop those into the Q&A or into the meeting chat. We'll answer questions about how open science touches on all of the parts of RDaF and forward. But next up, we are going to look at how you can navigate the online RDaF. This is a short video created by Eva Campo, one of our team members, and she'll be able to answer any questions that you have on that shortly.
In this demo, we will explore how to navigate the Research Data Framework app created by the Office of Data and Informatics at the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. The RDaF app will describe the curator profile through the data lifecycle as a function of topics and subtopics. From accessing the Profiles section to reviewing detailed descriptions and lifecycle stages, this guide will help you understand the intricacies of the curator role. The RDaF data lifecycle expands through 6 dimensions: envision, plan, generate or acquire, process or analyze, share and use or reuse, and preserve or discard. The topics associated to the curator's profile is described in this summary slide. Let's dive into the specifics of how to obtain this information. First, navigate to the NIST RDaF website. From here, we will point to the main summary page and then navigate to the RDaF web application. The summary of the Research Data Framework can be found at the top. A brief description of the RDaF can be found at the bottom of the page, as well as 2 videos by Dr. Robert Hanisch, Director of the Office of Data and Informatics at NIST and creator of the RDaF. The summary section contains links to the RDaF publication version 2.0, to the RDaF web application, and to 2 appendixes. One with an extensive collection of over 1,000 references supporting the RDaF, and another with a collection of curated profiles. Navigate to the web application. This is the homepage of the app, hosted at NIST. The menu on the left lists links to terminology, lifecycle stages, topics, subtopics, overarching themes, profiles, and references. Access the Profiles section and select the Curator profile from the drop-down menu and click Search. Navigate to the Curator profile. View the detailed definition of the Curator profile. At this stage, the app lists lifecycle stages with associated topics and subtopics, as well as subtopic definitions and links to informative references. By selecting a particular lifecycle stage, we can visualize the associated collection of topics and their definition. Similarly, any topic is associated with a collection of subtopics describing the curator's profile. The guide covered accessing the RDaF curator profile by exploring definitions, lifecycle stages, topics, and subtopics related to data curation. The RDaF team hopes this guide enhances your understanding of data curation processes and roles within the application. For further questions, please contact us at rdaf@nist.gov or at robert.hanisch@nist.gov. In this demo,
All right, so next up, we'll discuss some implementations that have occurred. There are 2 we'll discuss, and we'll send out some information. I'll put some information in the chat about how you can access some of these. So the first implementation effort that we were made aware of is with the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. This group supports digital research infrastructure throughout the Canadian government and throughout Canadian universities. They used RDaF version 1.0 to assess their progress in research data management. They did this by creating a scorecard from topics and subtopics. We met with them after they did this, and they gave us a lot of feedback, and we incorporated the lessons learned. So things that they told us about were where there was confusion about what exactly a topic or subtopic meant, which we ran with, and now there are definitions in all of the topics and subtopics. They also helped us understand that when they were doing these scorecards, it was kind of difficult, not just but without understanding exactly what we mean, not having a definition available so they could understand what we meant, but also some of these topics and subtopics are not necessarily outcome-based, their considerations and the like. That actually is something that we've talked a lot about when we go to our second implementation effort with SUNY. SUNY is the State University of New York, and they're working on a 2-phase implementation effort to really understand where their university system is when it comes to research data and research data management. It's a huge system, something like 40 different campuses, along with doctoral granting agencies, a medical school, and even down to two-year community colleges. So to help them understand this, they've got these two phases. The first one is derived of the SUNY RDaF tool, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. They have taken the time to create an outcome-based scorecard, which they're using to create, again, an outcome-based action plan for each campus. They're working on some pilot feedback sessions. Once that phase is done, they'll move on to creating lots of workshops, specifically executive level workshops, where they've found a lack of understanding about what needs to happen with research data and how provosts and the like can be of assistance to that. And then they'd like to share a lot of these outcomes through SUNY specific documents, workshops within and without SUNY, and hopefully have some sort of student application for that. So the tool that they are building is it almost looks like a workflow tool. Basically, you can click on one of these stages and it opens up to each of our topics. And from there, they have developed outcome-based activities, considerations, methods, all sorts of things that they've separated out and weeded out from various subtopics. So not all of the subtopics are listed verbatim here, but they have taken them and made them into much more actionable terms so that they can come up with these plans for moving their campuses forward. Other efforts that we've heard about are other scorecarding efforts, and then also we've heard that some people have taken this and actually just created profiles for themselves. And that's actually something we did in a workshop recently where we had our attendees create both profiles for themselves as individuals, also worked on profiles for their unit within their organization. That was at the Research Data Access and Preservation Forum last week. It was a great time, and I'd actually love to share with you all the tools that we shared there. So there's a spreadsheet for scorecard for two different lifecycle stages: Envision, which was worked on by SUNY, and then Share, Use, and Reuse, which NISTers, myself and others on the team worked on. And then we also have a profiling exercise in there that can build on the blank profile cards that we have available. So I'll put that into the chat in just a moment. And in the meantime, Bob or Ava, is there anything else you would like to share before we get into our Q&A time?
I just wanted to point out that the little video that Ava prepared showed an example just using the curator curator profile. Just an example. You can enter in many other ways as a different profile, as you know, through one of the topic areas, through one of the overarching themes. There are multiple ways to navigate the space, and that was an example of one such way to do it. Not the only way.
Thank you, Bob. All right, well, I will start the Q&A with a little bit, a couple things I've prepared. So Bob, would you want to talk about what we're looking for, what we're looking to do with RDaF in the rest of this year and possibly into the future?
Sure. So we consider RDaF version 2 as basically now a stable output, at least for the near term. We'd really like to work together with other organizations who see value in using the RDaF to assess their research data management posture. And we would like to help you in any way we can, given that we don't have infinite resources to do this, but we will do our best. The collaboration with SUNY is also aiming to produce a how-to guide If you pick up the RDaF in its complete form, it's, I think, over 200 pages plus appendices. A little bit daunting how to get started. So with SUNY's assistance, we intend to develop a startup guide how to use the RDaF with these various entry points that we talked about, and whether it's a scorecard, whether it's navigation tool for you, whether you want to build profiles for your staff and so forth, to help you get going with it. Long term, we do hope that the RDaF will be a living document. You may have just seen that NIST, amongst other agencies, has been given a substantial budget cut. So everything is a little bit uncertain about how much resource we'll be able to put into this. But we, much like the cybersecurity framework has just been had a major revision come out, we would hope to be able to maintain this as the research data ecosystem evolves and new technologies emerge and become important for research data management.
Excellent.
I see Chris Markham. Hi, Chris. How can agencies use the RDaF to help support the increasing needs for data sharing and management in the context of the new demands on them for use of AI? Yeah, AI has become pervasive. AI, depends on quality information. And I think the research data framework should help organizations to make judgments about the quality of the information they're providing. Do you go through some sort of internal audits before you release data? Do you have sufficient metadata attached to your data to make sure that somebody is interpreting it and understanding for which purposes it is fit to be used? These are all things that I think are incredibly important for inputs into AI and machine learning applications, such that they are trained on the best information available. So I think there are also potential applications of AI in helping to build quality metadata by reading descriptive information about an experiment or about a computer code, about a survey methodology that can help to generate that useful metadata. So I think AI is going to play a significant role here, both in terms of data quality and utility of the information that is provided to the algorithms. And I think it's okay if anybody wants to speak out, turn on your microphone and just shout out a question if you'd like. Thank you, Chris. Chris has been a stalwart supporter of our work at NIST on the framework, so I appreciate that.
So I'm going to do something a little bit, I see some people that I know in the room. So I'm going to say for publishers.
Ted is waving his hand.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Ted. Oh, yes, no.
Good to see you all, and thank you for an informative presentation. The one thing that you mentioned and emphasized was the list of references, and I think in the video that Eva showed, they said there's something like 1,000 references. Are those available in a way that we can get sort of 1,000 of them at a time?
So they are in a document because they aren't like actual references cited in a paper or citations referenced in the paper. They're like more like a bibliography. We don't have them in a structured format at all, but you can download the PDF. And then you can also pull them out of our web space. That's going to be a little bit more difficult for right now. That's something we're hoping to build in, is more support for automatic usage, like using APIs and the like. But Ted, talk to me. I might be able to get you something that's a little bit more structured.
Well, yeah. I mean, it sounds like a real important or an interesting or helpful resource. So yeah, if there's a way like a Zotero bibliography or something like that would be cool.
We do have a Zotero bibliography. I can look at making that available to the public.
Voila.
Yes. It's already in there. Thank goodness.
Good job.
Thank you,
Andrew,
Ted.
did you just type them in while you were talking there, or?
Just right now. Just right now.
Great. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, I have to give a shout out to one of our team members, Debbie Kaiser, who was the one who painstakingly went through and validated all the links to all these references. And wow, that was amazing.
So has anyone before this been able to go through the RDaF? Is there any feedback that you would want us to hear about it? You know, we're happy to take feedback via email, but we're also happy to take feedback now if you've gone through and looked at some things.
Well, that's your reading assignment for the evening. Download your personal copy and don't print it out though. Save a tree.
The free.
Bob, this is Chris Markham. Again,
Chris.
congrats on RDaF 2.0, and just like I congratulate you on 1.5. But I do want to, I wanted to ask a quick question. I know that RDaF is sort of this great public-facing resource, and could be used for stakeholders and data users, data providers, really across society. And I want to ask one specific use case, of course, with U.S. government agencies and the national labs, is how we'd like to sort of provide consistent guidance, and we often point to NIST for providing the standards for such guidance. But in this case, it would be for Open Government Data Act sharing provisions and for public assets. So, do you have any ideas or any thoughts on how RDaF can be used in the policy space?
Yeah. Let me think about that 1 second here, Chris, because it's not intended, of course, to be a standards document. It's intended to be a guide for organizations to help themselves orient themselves better. And so we're not telling, as I said earlier, we're not telling organizations what they have to do, certainly not from NIST, but we're aggregating what organizations do so that others can emulate those practices where they are relevant to them. I would love to see other federal agencies use the RDaF to do their self-assessments and to help them raise the profile of their data management capacities. But I hesitate to say that it's, that people would like to say, well, we are compliant with the NIST RDaF, because it's not really intended to be that kind of a document. If you want to make it that, Chris, we can talk about that. But
no, Bob, I wasn't referring to using this as a standard. I'm just saying that we often point to NIST for such standards, and in this case, there's just a lack of guidance in general, and particularly for how agencies make the determinations for what should be shared and what can be shared. And I think the RDaF provides some guiding light in that direction.
Yeah.
But how to raise its profile is still a challenge. And anyway, I want to bring that up.
Yeah, no, we'd love to see wide adoption of this and people to say, hey, we as a result of the NIST RDaF, we were able to make some significant improvements. We made some decisions about what we are able to share, and things that might have some restricted access. We figured out how to do that. It's also a way to reach out to other organizations because, we compiled this list of, I think, 150 or 200 organizations engaged in research data management, practice, and policy. So if nothing else, this is an encyclopedia that people can refer to help make those decisions.
Thank you, Bob. So Howard, nice to see you, Howard, has a question. What is the best way to understand some sample use cases for using RDaF? I think that's going to become a lot clearer as more people tell us how they're using it. And, like Bob said, we didn't want to say, this is what you need to be doing. So the RDaF is more of a guide for conversation, helping organizations understand where they are. And with the various implementations that we're starting to see, we'd like to gather those into, use cases and case studies and be able to put that out there as a sample implementation guide. But that's not quite there yet.
I would add, Howard, too. I mean, it's no big surprise that the scholarly publishing community is going to be undergoing massive changes in the coming decade, if not sooner. And I think there's material on the RDaF that bears significantly on the role that scholarly publishers may play in terms of research data management, preservation, and dissemination. So you might look at it from that perspective. Scanning through the topics and subtopics and saying, oh, here's something that publishers might have be influencers of or be influenced by, and how they craft their business practices going forward. Go ahead, Howard. I see your hand is up.
Yeah, so I was just curious, Bob, if you had already done some use case work with any of these folks, or is that work that you, like Andre was saying, that you want to do now? Because that's interesting to me. Because for me, in order for to spread the good word, obviously I'm a big supporter of this and I've been following it for quite a while, but it is a massive tome. And understand, right? And it's great, right? But it's big, and it's and I think in order for people, in the publishing space and otherwise, to really understand where to begin. I appreciate you mentioned the thing about Albany, which is a good start. But for me, it's always about what's the use case and what's the question that I could ask, and therefore this thing could answer.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. What I'd really like to do as organizations start using the RDaF is collect user stories. How did they use it? What did they learn from it? How did they approach it, and share those? Maybe we set up a community communication site that enables people to share their experiences, because we can't do it all on the NIST end. And we're not scholarly publishers ourselves, at least not anymore. And I think getting some initial use cases, how we use the RDaF out there as exemplars would be really helpful. But since version 2 only came out 6 or 8 weeks ago, we're still early in the game, and we'd love to sit down with some publishers and say, how can we help you wade into this and get started?
Great. Thank you, Howard. Anyone else? Well, we do want to thank everyone for joining us, and we really appreciate the questions that we've gotten. Please feel free to get a hold of us. I will put down our email one more time if you have questions. And we look forward to working with everyone on this big project with the tome.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here today. Appreciate it, and hope to hear from you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Thanks. Cheers.